Okay, let's go. So, yeah. I'm gonna start doing videos like this where I'm wearing a mask and a hat. It doesn't really have my identity that much, but it does kind of obstruct the view of my face. So, I'm going to be addressing, pardon me as I do this, so that way I can pull it up and actually see what I'm addressing. I think I'm going to start doing things on music theory, because when I had recorded, or I had arranged Who We Are for a saxophone brass ensemble, one, I wasn't ever planning to arrange any music for more than 5 instruments if it wasn't going to become a concert piece. But here I did it. And 2, I kind of just did this in a day. Turn on concert pitch so I can see what I'm doing. By the way, if you don't know, I use Note Flight. I think I've mentioned this quite a bit. So if you don't know, I'm sorry, you're a little behind the curve. Or you're new. In which case, if you're new, welcome. Hi. I'm Jerry Renee, or DJ Ray, or DJ Renée-gade, whatever you want to call me by my artist name. Recently, I uploaded a video, Who We Are ensemble, made for saxophone and brass. And Who We Are by Imagine Dragons. I can't speak. We're already 3 minutes in. And it was quite surprising considering I'm quite young and actually don't have formal training in music theory, but my band teacher, thank you so much, Satterwhite, is very helpful in working with students like me that want to get better, not necessarily at their instrument, but also at understanding why music works the way it does. 1 second. Okay. Usually I do my arrangements by ear and by looking at a piano piece and then spreading the parts out. But this one was a bit different because, one, like any wind ensemble, you need more than one instrument to make a chord. And 2, there are certain parts where there's actually only drum breaks, where just the drum set is playing, or percussion. And this piece is, or this ensemble I arranged, isn't made for percussion. So I had to use some of my own creative liberties. And what I did was, there's a common chord progression throughout the whole piece that changes later on, but basically it goes from G minor, B flat major, F major, and C minor. It later on will change to G minor, B flat major, A minor, and then C minor. But during the little percussion breaks, I kept it as the progression I said before. So what I did was I took my saxophones and I went, okay, so what is the percussion doing? Where it goes. I took my most dominant sounding saxophone, the soprano sax, which, God, I don't know how I arranged for it. If you don't know, I much, much prefer low winds. But I took my soprano sax And I went, okay, so what's our main note of our chord? Our main note for G minor was G minor. So I made that our part right there. And I'm going to use the mixer real quick just so that way you can hear. Hopefully it won't play more than one measure. Yeah. So it'll do that. Next, I took tenor sax, my second most prominent sounding saxophone, because one thing I've learned about saxophones is the reason why they're arranged, usually you look at them highest to lowest, and there's a consistent pattern of it being B flat instrument, E flat instrument, B flat instrument, E flat instrument, so on and so forth. And your B flat instruments are your more prominent sounding ones. The exception I found is baritone sax versus bass saxophone, but that's being, bass saxophone is written 2 octaves below. So, kind of gonna have a bit of a difference. For your high voices, your soprano sax, since it's your B flat saxophone, is gonna be your dominant. For your middle voices, tenor sax is gonna be your dominant. And surprisingly, baritone sax in some areas is going to be your next dominant. So this is going to be soprano sax tenor. So that's your pattern for those two. And what I did was, since tenor sax is sounds an octave below than as written, octave below major second, I took my next note in the chord that I wanted to be most dominant, which usually you'll want your fifth to be dominant, by what I've realized, but for this chord progression, I specifically chose I specifically chose instead my third, and that would be D. And D is my third rather than my fifth, as it would be, because the chord instead goes B flat as your lowest note, then D, then G, rather than your usual thirds chord where it goes 1, 3, 5, do, mi, sol. Instead, it goes mi, sol, do. I dropped my baritone sax an octave lower, and now you have... But soprano sax, you can still hear, is dominant. One, because I made tenor sax mezzo piano, since it's your dominant middle voice. Like, it dominates, when it comes to sound, baritone sax. And then I made my baritone sax mezzo forte, and then I made my soprano sax forte. Since it's going to be the only one playing its part. Our rhythm diverges a little bit. I'm not sure if it was the bass drum. Not going to play it while I'm recording this video. And so, our alto sax is going to be, last but not least, our fifth, or first, however you look at it, because it's kind of your mi and mi, sol, do. Here's alto sax. And so that's our B flat. And we don't need any other B flats, which is surprising, but that's because even though I put mezzo piano, alto sax is almost as prominent as tenor sax. And then last but not least, our bass line, or bass sax, because it literally does play a bass line. And since it's our bass line, usually when it comes to chord progressions, you want your bass to have your dominant note. So now we're adding bass sax. And notice how you can hardly hear the bass line because bass sax is, well, it's bass and thus not the easiest to hear. And the G that's written on the staff is a note flight. Well, it's on the staff. It's a G on the staff. Dropping it an octave lower would just make it sound horrible unless you really wanted that bass sound, which I do add later on with the tuba. But hardly do I ever drop that low with bass sax. The only reason why I do is so that way it actually is in the bass saxophone range, because saxophones are a bit limited in their range. They can go up to, they can do 2 octaves of B flat or their B flat, which translates differently, and then a third higher. And that's it. So here's our full chord progression. I turned up the bass a little bit so you can hear it. And then next, we're going to, our soprano and bass sax are going to go down to F, whereas the rest will stay the same for our B flat. So and nothing changed except for those two, but it was a very dominant or prominent sound change for the chord, because your F is going to be your prominent, is what is the note you want to be prominent, despite B flat being the chord name, and now it's do, mi, sol. Whatever your top note is going to be the one that you want to hear the most, by what I've noticed. So now your alto sax is going to go down to A, while your tenor and baritone are going to go down to C. B flat, no. And then, last but not least, your alto sax is going to go up 5th. Your bass is going to go up to G again, and your soprano is going to go up to G. Here's the full section now. And then move on. Now, let's talk about a different chord progression. At the beginning, we have arpeggios in the baritone sax and the tenor sax. Baritone sax goes do, do, sol, mi, do, sol, mi, do, sol, mi, sol, mi, do. Your tenor sax is going to go. So, arpeggios. Simple arpeggios. And they only change one note at a time for the first 2 measures. They change then 2 notes. Yep, 2 notes, and then last but not least, you're actually going to change 3 notes, when really you're kind of not, but you're going to raise, rather than having C as your beginning note, and thus the prominent sound of your chord, you're going to have it as your secondary, or your, I don't know how to describe it. I kind of blanked out. So we'll have arpeggios. That's a different chord progression that we're going to want. I'll play the bass line and tenor sax. Baritone sax being bass line with a beat or more than just a whole note. And then next, this is where our accidental comes in, and in the original key, I purposely translated it a half step up because wind instruments or concert instruments in general, which are wind instruments, wow, sorry, but they're not good with sharps. For example, I'm going to play this from music notes. The chord progression changes by a half step. And this counts for all of the chords, actually. A lot of people don't realize this, but for example, it goes F sharp minor for the original key, A minor, E minor, B minor. And for the arrangement I made, so that way it was more compatible, it's G minor, half step up, B flat minor, half step up, F minor, half step up, and C minor, half step up. And so when you have next up is going to be your accidentals. So the original was C sharp minor, sorry, but for ours it's going to be D major. I said C sharp minor. C sharp major to D major. So hang on. Here we go. And then it goes back to G minor. And so that's our arpeggio progression. Now, our chord progression for the beginning, and the beginning doesn't have that many people playing, nor throughout the piece will you have that many people playing the chord, because, well, at the beginning you want it to be quiet. I have that pianissimo for trombone and tuba. So my bass line is actually pianissimo, and my one somewhat not bass, or my two somewhat not bass, are French horn and baritone, which I found have kind of similar sound, but they're just piano rather than pianissimo. And just with those four instruments, which it's 4 rather than 3, because as much as I want it to be quiet, I also want the full chord sound, not just a first and a fifth or a first and a third, with my dominant note still being dominant. And I couldn't really do that without having a little help from French horn. So here's our chord progression. So chord progression, your dominant note is going to stay in your French horn and baritone, which kind of goes against what the advice I gave about tuba, and I may edit this later, but the only reason why I have tuba playing instead a not dominant note is so that way we just have that sound. And let's take a look actually at the chord progression for the two measures that have D major. Now our dominant notes go from F sharp to A. I purposely do this so that way we know it's supposed to change, because in your tenor sax you go so instead I want it to So instead, I want it. Stop. That's not how I want it. There we go. Instead of keeping F sharp as our dominant, I make A. I accidentally turn on tenor sax, but it's okay. So that's our chord progression at the beginning. And last but not least, I'm going to discuss the harmony that went along with the harmony that went alongside the melody. So where it goes, up in the morning, up in the evening. I'm tired, so I'm sorry. I'm not the best singer, and it kind of gets worse when I'm tired. So here's our French horn. Rather than keeping up in the morning, so there are some sections where it'll stay in unison, and other sections where it will not. And I'm gonna purposely, at the moment, now that we're done using our bass sax for now, I'm gonna purposely turn down tenor sax so that way you can hear the harmony a bit more. If I actually turn on tenor sax, Jesus. So I keep that part in unison. Really no flight. Keep that part in unison on purpose, because with all that's going on, when you later add on, for example, here's turning the trombone on, the measure after that, or as it's ending. So here, trombone is resting when it goes, oh, to me. The only note that's different in that progression is B flat in the harmony versus D. And our bass line trombone is resting because tuba holds the bass line, but then trombone will join on. And let me turn down my trombone so that we can still hear our melody working with our, harmonies working with our melody. What I do is first look at our chords, or our chord progression. Our chord progression for the first measure of the melody is G minor. So, and the original melody is up in the morning. So it goes, let me make sure I have this. Do 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 so, do 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 so. And instead, since it's fourth, which I feel sounded pretty good, I don't like using thirds that much. Only when I absolutely have to keep it sounding good with the chord. So I went do so so do so, do so so do so, do so so do so. Let me drop that. Do do so so do so do so so do so. I turn our fourth into a fifth, so that way, because the melody at that point goes up by a third, And rather than making it a fourth going down, I made it a fifth going up, so that way, one, we didn't have some suspended chord in a place that you don't want it, because suspended chords really need their own area. Next our chord is B flat major, but our melody stays on G. So here's our harmony. It goes D, D, B flat, B flat, D, B flat, F, because where the F is, there's a D, so that way, again, no suspended chord, we avoided that. And still kept it pretty, still kept it a harmonizing note, etc. And yay, and we didn't have to keep it stale by having B flat. There is one moment where they have a note in unison, but that hardly happens in the harmony. Go. And then that last note goes. One, two. Let me make sure. Two versus so and like I said before, there's only one note that harmonizes because trombone comes in, screws everything up. I'm sorry, us trombones screw everything up. Especially those tenor saxes. Then next, to strengthen, add trumpet to increase the melody. So now our harmony is less prominent, which I may work on. Mostly because I have so much going on that I don't want to get rid of. That it's kind of... meh. So anyway, listening to this part. That's where our French horn joins our chord. Our alto sax actually next joins the melody to keep it strong as go. Our chord there is D major, so tenor sax goes. And all of, including our harmony, is forte. What happened to our trumpet? Hello, trumpet. There we go. And then mixing it up, it has an eighth note in the melody. Eighth note, then 2/16. But instead I go all 16ths in the harmony. Our note in the melody is D, that eighth note. So when I do the 4/16 rather than the eighth and 2/16, sorry, I choose both B flat and A, which both one minor, one major. I'm trying to think and make sure there's no minor chord that can have both D and A without being suspended. But it still harmonizes with D without suspending. Then next, it goes to French horn, soprano sax. Back to making everything sound hunky-dory dandy, whatever. The pickup note I keep in unison. I do have baritone sax does have B flat there. Purposely do a pickup there. I'll let you guys hear it. Now you got that? French horn is back to harmonizing. Again, G minor, so G, G, B flat, G. So, all goes, who we are, fa la, do. And then next it's, let me again turn down the soprano. Just turning down our melody. During those 16th notes, it goes in the melody G G G G G G G G G D C B flat, and then it goes to 8th notes C D D, and our harmony goes instead B flat. Harmony goes instead. Adding our melody back. Do, do, do. Doesn't matter if it's. This is where our A minor is, so to harmonize, I put E natural. And in the previous measure, I did the opposite of what happened before in the bridge, where there was an 8th note, 2/16. There's now 4/16 in the melody, but I do an 8th note and 2/16. But hear that. And trombone has a grace note. Then glissando, because I love my glissandos. It goes. G, G flat C. Instead it goes in the melody. Not a day. So D G C. And trombone goes and messes everything up because it has a glissando that's. And I didn't feel that should have been out of unison there, where it goes, oh, won't you? So I have only one harmonizing note, G. Now in the harmony for Save Us, it goes, it said, I can't hear, I'm sorry. That's not a conflicting note, they're all just in unison. So, last measure goes D, F sharp, A, D, F, E, F, D, G. Because it goes back to G minor, but for now it's in D major, then goes to G minor, while the melody is going F sharp, D, D, F sharp, G, A, F sharp, G. So that's 3rd, unison, 5th, unison, third, third, third unison. I'll put that on the screen. And then this stays in harmony. So that was just a bit, those were some tips on how I actually made sure everything, or how I took some creative liberties where otherwise you usually can't take some. Sorry. Fixing things back to where it was. I think that was how. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and goodbye.